tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Well, I think we've got the first English guest on since the new intro. So, welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. I'm Manners. Joining us from, where are you, in Leeds? Did you say?
I'm in Yorkshire.
Yep, James Butler, the cricket badger, on the show. Did you like the opener?
I did. I was actually bopping along to that. I liked that. It was good.
Yeah, my spray at the cricket fans at Lords. And joining me is Damien Watson. Damien, welcome back.
Good to be here. I wonder if your hatred of England is going to be tempered by our guest today, Manners.
It certainly is. This is part of my plan. I'm starting with the Ashes coming up to get in English fans' good graces again, so I don't get lynched at the SCG in January 2026. But it's great to have James on the show because this appearance is only 8 years in the making. I was looking through our DMs on Twitter in like 2017 before the Ashes. We contacted on Twitter about maybe doing stuff together with the podcast, but I couldn't due to my contractual obligations. But we've finally made it happen. So, James, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
It's a pleasure. Looking forward to it, and always good to talk to some Aussies to see where how the mood is.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'll tell you what, the mood is I'm in hiding because I've upset the Indian cricket fans in a big way on Twitter. So for those following on, the Indians won the Champions League, the inappropriately named, Champions Trophy. So they won the Champions Trophy. And what annoyed me about that win is fair play to them. You can only play what's in front of you, but it is not a World Cup. And it feels like to me, the Indian cricket fans and everybody in India is carrying on like they've won the 50-over World Cup. It is not the 50-over World Cup. It is nowhere near as prestigious as the 50-over World Cup. So I got a little bit disappointed with some of the carrying on. And then Harsha Bhogle tweeted out, what a wonderful tournament we've had. Like, in what way was that tournament wonderful? In no way. Ask the host Pakistan how wonderful it was. And by going unbeaten, once again, India have shown that they are by some distance the premier white ball team in the world. 23 wins out of 24 results is astonishing. So that doesn't take into account that Australia are the 50-over world champions, and there is no reason for them to not be considered the best 50-over team in the world. And then, so all I did was quote tweet Harsha Bhogle with a photo of Australia lifting the 50-over World Cup. And look, this is obviously not one of my smartest moves on Twitter. I've got to say, like, normally I think things through. This one I didn't think through. I thought it was just funny. So I just put the picture there of Australia with the World Cup, the 6 trophies to signify Australia's 6 50-over World Cups, and just wrote all that really matters. Now, 150 retweets later, 200 comments later, some of the comments I've been given, live in present, you fat old jerk. Broke. I got a lot of old fat jerk. I got a lot of the jealousy of the Anglo-Saxons and calling me a crybaby. But James, honestly, this tournament was shithouse.
It's a tournament too many, isn't it? I mean, the Champions Trophy, as you say, it's not a World Cup. We have enough of those. We have a T20 World Cup every 2 years. We have the 4-yearly 50-over World Cup, and that's surely enough. We talk a lot about player burnout and players playing too much, and we kind of force them purely for financial reasons to rock up for a Champions Trophy to play again and kind of dance for us kind of players. And the fact that it was played in Pakistan, and Pakistan put a lot of effort into hosting that tournament, a lot of expense as well to host that tournament, to polish up their stadia. And then India, for obvious reasons, there's no love lost between India and Pakistan, and don't want to go down the route of that because, as you have, I've had my inbox full of Indian fans telling me to, talking about colonialism and racism and all the rest of it. But I think with India, there's a dangerous thing with India because India is a tremendous country. India has got some tremendous players. India's got 1.4 billion people. India is a huge power in world cricket, but there's a little bit of a danger that they see English and Australian, and don't get me wrong, England and Australia have made bad decisions in the past, and they've done it for their own selfish reasons. But now India has got the kind of the power in the game. I think a lot of Indian fans are thinking, well, because you were so bad, we can be worse to you now, and that's not really. Yeah, with great power, as Spider-Man was told, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think now is the time for India to actually show a bit of love around the globe and associate nations get a bit boosted up. And it's not good for India to win everything. It's not good for Indian fans to win everything. The beauty of following sports teams, as I know as a Leeds United fan, is that you lose probably more times than you win, and you kind of the good days are special because you've had bad days. Whereas there is a danger with global cricket at the moment that India are getting so powerful and they've got so many players to choose from. They could win everything forever. And that isn't going to be good for global cricket. So there needs to be that competition in the game. But I think you're right. I think Champions Trophy, let's stick a line through it. I don't know about you, but I think 50-over cricket is my least favourite format. I like T20, the kind of crash bang wallop and a little bit of a, sort of cheap thrills kind of thing. I love Test cricket. That's my biggest format. It's like a big feature film where you get the swings of ascendancy and the best team wins, and it's a real test. 50-over cricket's kind of sitting in the middle and doesn't really have a place anymore. And if we're looking at only 365 days in a year, maybe 50-over cricket has had its day.
I don't know if it's had its day, but I just want to pick up on something you said about.
I mean, you would say that as world champions, you would say that.
Yes, we win World Cups for fun.
We should freeze 50-over cricket in 2019.
Yeah, we don't need countbacks. We win them like their way. But something I just want to pick up, you talked about India winning everything. I don't mind India winning everything, but it just feels like the playing field hasn't been particularly level. In the Champions Trophy, the issues with sort of a home ground advantage for India. In the T20 World Cup, they knew exactly where they were playing the semi-final because of the TV time. So I guess if they win everything and it's fair and square, it just feels like it's orchestrated for them to win everything.
I think you're right. I mean, it's a really complicated situation, India against Pakistan. You say why. You put on social media, why are India not playing in Pakistan? You get 1,000 messages saying that they're all terrorists, and you can't win that argument. And I do agree with what Viv Richards said. That I think sport can be a big healer. It brings people together. You can kind of go outside a venue, a bar or something, and meet somebody that you probably would never speak to before. And your first question is, who do you support? Or what, it can really bring people together, sport, and it can heal. And I think India playing Pakistan, we've seen India play Pakistan in every single ICC tournament because they're always conveniently drawn against each other because it's the only time they ever play. And there's always camaraderie between the two sides. There's respect between the two sets of players. If you play that more often, there needs to be India-Pakistan matches probably at a neutral venue. Because that would be as big as the Ashes. It would probably be even bigger than the Ashes in some respects because the audience for that, Pakistan's got millions and millions of people living there. India's got 1.4 billion. The audience for an India-Pakistan Test series would be astronomical. So there's got to be a way to bring those two countries together. And if you play each other and you start talking to people, then maybe it makes the political side of things a little bit easier as well. But you're right. If you rock up in Dubai and you know that you're having to pick a team just for that ground, they obviously filled their team with spinners. They knew that was going to turn a little bit. They knew they're going to be able to have control. All the other teams were scurrying around catching flights where they were going back to sit on their sun lounges around the hotel pool. It wasn't fair, was it? So you're giving the best team in the world, in my opinion, an even bigger advantage, and that can't be right.
Yeah. Now, please direct all your feedback to @cricket_badger about the India-Pakistan games. Damien, you've been sitting on the sidelines. Look, I'm still
Right.
recovering. I said I got about 100 messages calling me an old, fat, bald jerk. I also got 100 messages of sandpaper. So my ego's taking a battering. What did you make of it all? Just
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think inevitably, given India is the most populous country in the world now, they overtook China, I think, officially back in 2023. It's inevitable they're going to be a bigger and bigger nation and going to have bigger and bigger power given the population. Just on the point there that was made, I'd love to see an India v Pakistan test match, incidentally, at the MCG. I mean, the precedent was set in that T20 World Cup back a couple of years ago at the MCG. When I talked to people who were there at the MCG in Melbourne when they got over 90,000, it was like an EPL crowd. That's what it was like. And, if we could replicate that, have a test match there on neutral territory, very high population of Indian and Pakistan people in Australia. I'd love to see that. And it's been pushed for the last couple of years now. Whether we will see it, I'm not sure. The schedules have to align. Just on the Champions Trophy thoughts there, it's always seen to be the poorer cousin of the World Cup. We're probably biased in Australia, boys, because it was for a long time the one tournament that Australia couldn't win until 2009. But I still think there's a place for 50-over cricket. There's no doubt we've seen with some of the sides selected, certainly from an Australian point of view, it's seen to be the lesser of the three formats. Then we put Cooper Connolly at the top of the order for crying out loud against India. So there's no doubt the standard and the importance of it's diminished. But the 50 in order to apply that, you still need the various series around it, bilateral series, whatever it may be, to condition sides to play in it. So I think there's still a place for it.
Yeah, it's interesting, James, what you said about where the format sort of rank at the moment, and I think about where the ICC trophies kind of rank at the moment, and I still have the 50-over World Cup as the most prestigious ICC trophy.
Yeah.
Then I've actually probably got the World Test Championship at number 2 now. I think that's gaining prestige quite quickly, despite Ben Stokes not being a fan of it and not knowing the rules. And then I think the 20-over World Cup is actually falling down the list to me because I think it's overkill playing it every 2 years. I think maybe if you don't want to play it 4 years, split the difference and play it every 3 years. But to me, every 2 years doesn't feel like a World Cup to me. And then you probably got the Champions Trophy, a long way behind those top three. Where do you sort of rank them?
I think you're right on the T20 side of things. And we play far too much T20. You got T20 tournaments in every single country in the world, and playing it 2 yearly, it makes it less special, doesn't it? You don't hold on to that crown for very long. I think the World Test Championship is seen differently in England because England don't get anywhere near the final. So I don't think it's ever really got into the consciousness of English fans because we never really competed in it. So it's kind of just stuck to one side. So I can see why it's more important to New Zealand, Australia, and India, because they're the three teams that have really battled it out so far in the World Test Championship. I think with 50 over, there probably is a place for something in the middle. I'd make it 40 overs because I think with 50 overs, it's a very long day. I do commentary on it, and it's a long day to commentate on a 50 over match. But you get probably the 15 overs in the middle is where it just kind of everything treads water for a little bit, and then you get your opening power plays, you get the kind of the dash for runs at the end, and in the middle there is kind of an hour and a half of nothingness really.
I lived in England in the mid-90s, and when I lived there was a 40 over competition, and it was fantastic because, as you say, it's 80 overs. You chop off that 2.5 hours of the game, and you can watch it in an afternoon, and it's more meaty than a 20 over game because people can score hundreds, etc.
I think England have absolutely made a right mess of the 50 over format. We won in 2019 the Cricket World Cup at Lords, and then they
sort of.
No, we did, but then they then they've marginalised it. They've stuck it behind the 100. The 100's all shiny, and everybody loves the 100, kind of. But it's kind of the 50 over thing in England's become kind of almost like a second team tournament played in the summer behind the 100, so the other players can play matches. And the last, I can't remember what year it was, but there used to be a 40 over tournament in England where the last year of that was fantastic. There were some brilliant games in that, and then they changed it to 50 over to kind of match the international structure, and never brought it back. But I think, I mean, just kind of developing that a little bit. The England have always been really bad at taking success and making the most of it. 2005 Ashes, one of the best series ever. They stuck cricket behind a paywall to make money. So that there's no English cricket really played on free-to-air television. Once in a blue moon, you get it. And 2019 won the Cricket World Cup. Nation enthused for a few days, but then kind of put a full stop behind that. It's kind of like sit back, job done, rather than actually really grasp it and take it forward and get kids excited. They made the 50 over tournament in England lesser rather than better. So, England have been really guilty of missing opportunities at times, I think. But 40 over for me would be better.
Just a question on that, James, that point that you made. If you look back, because it's effectively the 20-year anniversary this year since the 05 Ashes series, taking it away from free-to-air, has the significance of the game really diminished? If you look over that holistic time period, has it diminished in England in terms of its stature compared to the era where even celebrities like Elton John and Michael Caine loved it because it was the source of sport for the summer? You know what I mean?
I think in short, yes. I mean, what they did, and what cricket I think is guilty of globally as well, they try to make a quick buck next week rather than think about what the game can look like in 20 years' time. And Sky, who cover cricket in England, do a really good job. Their coverage is brilliant, but you obviously need to pay big bucks every month to get Sky. So unless you're a cricket badger and you basically pay out your money, you don't get to see the games. When I was a kid, it was all on free to air, and you basically, I fell in love with the game by one summer's day flicking through the channels, thinking, what are all these people doing as a kid, and kind of getting absolutely engrossed in it. And kind of you then, cricket's a very simple game, but it's a very complicated game. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of things to kind of, if you get into it, to kind of devour and work out. But that was off the back of flicking through the channels and finding it and thinking, I'll watch this. And my mum shouting at me, it's sunny outside, James, get outside. And I was thinking, no, I like this. I don't want to watch this. But nowadays, kids who are kind of looking for something to do don't stumble across cricket because it's not there for them. Unless you're
on TikTok. We need to broadcast cricket on TikTok or YouTube.
Unless you're in a really sporty family, and they've got Sky Sports because they love football, and kind of it just carries on through the summer. You don't get exposed to it, and I think that this is what's wrong. I think with cricket in general, really. What I would like to see globally and kind of domestically is people sitting around a table and thinking, where do we want this game to go? Where do we want cricket to look like in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time? How do we want to preserve what's good about the game, but bring in these new things at the same time? You've only got so many days in the calendar. We need to fit it all in. We need to look after players. We need to give fans what they want, try and make everybody happy. You can't always make everybody happy, but let's try and make everybody happy. But what cricket does isn't think 30, 20, 10 years time. Cricket thinks about next week. How do we make some cash next week? What's going to be the thing that actually excites people next week? How can we bring it in? The 100 is a prime example of that in my regard in England. I think the 100, it's obviously going to bring some money into the game. That's good short-term wise for county cricket. But longer term, what happens? And we get basically people, I think, are getting a bit fed up of being just banged over the head by another T20 match played, same players. Glenn Maxwell, basically, he's playing in Barbados one week in a different shirt. He plays next week in the 100. Then the week after that, he's in the IPL. Yet, does it really matter? No. You need to have cricket that matters.
Yeah, I agree. That sort of idealism is not welcome on this podcast because, in my opinion, self-interest, unfortunately, reigns supreme in most things in life, and cricket's no different.
That's the trouble, isn't it? You've got all of these countries who've got different things that will make them happy. What India want, England don't want. Australia probably want something different. New Zealand, Pakistan, and on that kind of level, want something different than the associate nations around the world who are desperately trying to get their moment in the sun. They all want something different, but it's very hard to please everybody.
It is. All right. So anyway, I just want to tie a bow on that. India won the Champions Trophy. Congratulations, India. There you go. You got your little Champions Trophy. Australia have won 2 World Cups since you won the last time. So I think that's all that really matters. But Rohit Sharma's and Kohli, they're playing on. So they are a great white ball side. Don't get me wrong. They are a great white ball side. I just like them to win when it's a level playing field. Big news though came out today, so it's great we've got a poem on the podcast. So 2 years basically from now, the 150th anniversary test will be played at the MCG, Australia hosting England. I suggested a while ago that in a nod to the future, Australia should be hosting India for this test match instead. But they've gone with England, so fair enough. But so that test to be played March 11 to March 15, 2027, and it's going to be played under lights now with the pink ball. Damien, you're a Victorian and MCG stalwart. What do you think about this decision? They're saying it's because it'll be played outside school holidays, but I've heard other people comment that this would be more about the value of the TV rights if you play it at night, because then you can sell the rights all around the world in more better times.
And at the end of the day, too, Metters, locally, more people, if you're at work, you're going to watch it at night time. You got that prime time slot where the pace attack will be bowling with that pink ball under lights. So I think it'll be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. The centenary test, of course, was played in 1977. I think they got over 64,000 on the first day there at the MCG. And one of the great test matches of all time as well, at least from an Australian point of view, because the ledger went our way. But if you look at the twists and turns of that match, it was sensational. The only thing that maybe could dampen it is if we're in the middle of March and it starts pouring with rain. Fortunately, we tend to get warmer weather even in March in Melbourne these days, but that's always the risk. But if we're lucky with the weather, I think it'll be a great spectacle, no question about that.
Well, I guess one of the benefits of the pink ball and playing at lights is you can get a result in less time. So you got the 5 days. If you lose a bit of time to weather, you're probably going to be all right. But James, what do you think about this decision? Because, this is not the traditional path. And as well, the first test was played during the day. They're playing this at night. But time difference wise, I guess, it'll start sort of, very early morning your time, like 4 or 5. So you get up and you get to see the last couple of sessions, maybe.
I mean, when you're talking about kind of getting the matches finished in a certain time, then you don't need to worry about that with England. Every match is finished in 3 days these days. But I think, in terms of the time thing, it means that people will be able to get up and watch at least the last session over the breakfast and what have you, which is quite good, I think, from an English perspective, rather than stay up all night. I'll be staying up all night, I guess, commentating on it, but that's my own cross to bear. But I think pink ball cricket, I mean, it's never really caught on in England, the day-night stuff, because in the height of the English summer, it stays light quite late. So you hardly ever get the benefit of the floodlights, unless you go really late, and then nobody can get home afterwards. If you're taking public transport, that's all finished. So it's never really caught on. But I do like watching it under lights. I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to the UAE and watch kind of day-night games there, and there's always something special about being in a crowd when it's nighttime. When you watch a football match or whatever, under the floodlights, you feel a bit closer to the action. Everything feels a little bit more kind of intimate. So I do like that atmosphere. So yeah, I mean, 150 years of Test cricket between the two nations, I think it's should be very special, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it should be a great game, and I'm happy with the decision to play under lights because it is very, very good for viewers. I always think of the punter who, works all day and then they go, Jesus, I'm knocking off work and I've still got sort of, 4 or 5 hours of cricket to watch. Whereas, if it's played in the traditional slot, then that punter might have it, in the background at work or follow on, but they can't, sit down and watch it. So although it's not the traditional daytime test match like the centenary test, I still think it works really well, and it's going to do huge ratings. I mean, I reckon this will go off because I think it'll be such an auspicious occasion, and I think
the timings we were talking about, the fact that the English audience will be waking up and still be able to watch it, will probably mean that because Sky haven't actually covered that many games abroad. Sky tend to do the English summer, and then other TV providers kind of bid for the winter rights. So kind of, I guess, the value of those winter rights will go up. It's obviously the Ashes, but it's also at a time where English fans will be able to watch it a little bit more, which adds value.
Yep, definitely. All right, we're going to take our first break on Cricket Unfiltered, and then we'll be back to talk about, is English cricket in disarray? Welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Menners. I've got my co-host Damien Watson. We've got special guest, the Cricket Badger, James Butler, coming to us from Leeds. James, so I wanted to ask you, after this Champions Trophy, Butler's quit as ODI skipper, and the England team is moving into, I think, a pretty big year. You've got India at home for 5 Test matches, and then you've got the Ashes in Australia. And I think this year will be the making of the McCullum-Stokes union. All the bullshit that they've been saying the last few years. Well, they haven't actually won anything. Well, now you've got India at home. You've got Australia away, where you haven't won a Test match since 2010, 11 here. So even if you come here and compete, even if you don't even have to win, if you just put up a good show and don't get embarrassed, they've probably done okay. So I think just huge pressure on McCullum and Stokes to deliver.
Totally, and Rob Key's somebody that's never really mentioned in that as well. He's the director, and he's come in and made these appointments. There's been a lot of chat about Bazball that you'll be more than aware of. Some of it,
we spent hours making fun of it on this podcast.
So, I mean, some of the Bazball ethos, I think, is good. Kind of taking on the more positive role that in certain situations works. And there's been some wonderful days of Bazball, where there's been huge amounts of runs scored, and England have maybe fashioned a win and a defeat out of what would in any other Test match have been a draw.
It's about 50-50, I think. You've got,
but I mean, ultimately, the results are no different. England win at home and lose away. That's kind of the way it goes. That's how it's always been. I think you're right. The fact that we've got India in the summer over here, then we come down under to Australia. 2 of the toughest Test series that England have faced. India are now very strong. Australia away, as you mentioned, England never win. So and rightly or wrongly, English teams and England's kind of hierarchy are always judged on the Ashes. Australia's no different, I guess. You have that 4-year cycle, but all we talk about in that 4 years is the next Ashes, and forget about this next Test against West Indies, Pakistan, or whatever. It's about how that team's building for the Ashes coming forward, which is kind of a bit disrespectful for the other nations, really. But the Ashes is special, and there's a lot of chat in England about having this fast bowling battery that's going to come down and knock the Aussies over and all this kind of stuff, but half of them are never fit. When Mark Wood's in full song, in full cry, Mark Wood is as good as anybody. He's a brilliant lad, and he is a tremendous quick bowler. But he's hardly, he's on the park 50% of the time. They keep bringing in these players, and then they're injured for a while. You don't see them for a bit. So I fear a little bit for England over the next 12 months. I think McCullum's obviously taken on the reins in the white ball as well, and that started off brilliantly in the Champions Trophy. England were dreadful. And were dreadful in the matches against India prior to that as well. And now Jos Butler's stepped away from the captaincy. Jos Butler, I think, wasn't a captain. I think Jos Butler's a great bloke. He's a wonderful white ball player, but he's not a captain. And that's been proven, I think, over the period of his tenure. He wears his heart on his sleeve too much, and when England were losing, he just looked desperately sad. And that's not what you want a captain. You don't want the captain to be kind of standing on the outfield crying almost. You want the captain to be, Owen Morgan's the best white ball captain I've seen in England's colours, and he was always very even keel. If we were winning,
level.
Yeah, and that's what you want your captain to be. You want your fielders to look at the captain and think, yeah, he's in control of this. Jos Butler, I didn't think ever did. Danger is they're talking about Ben Stokes taking on the captaincy of the white ball team now. And, the reason that Ben Stokes stepped away from 50 over was because his body was in bits and he was struggling to stay on the park for Test matches. He's made a big thing of captaining the Test team being the priority, and it's allowing him to kind of preserve his body and to get out there on the park. And now we're talking about throwing in the baton to kind of captain every single team England have got, which is going to be probably detrimental. I mean, I'm sure he'd do a good job, but you want to have a fit Ben Stokes for the Ashes coming up. So, yeah, it's a very strange time, I think, for English cricket. This all-out attack thing, which they took to the Champions Trophy, that was their mentality going there. They were trying to play that Owen Morgan style, but without the the play has been quite as good. I don't think that 11 that England put out in the 2019 World Cup covered all bases. The 11 they've got at the moment is struggling to find its form. And Harry Brooks is a tremendous young player, but he seems to be out of nick. So there's all sorts of questions, I think, around English cricket, which I'm sure will delight you massively.
They certainly do. They certainly do. What would you give England a chance at winning next summer? In Australia?
Yeah, in recent history, no, not really. I think there'll be all the usual kind of preamble. There'll be brave words. They'll be talking about taking the attack to the Australians, but the proof will be in the pudding in that first test, and the first ball of that first test probably will dictate how it goes, because it's not that long ago Rory Burns was bowled around his legs and all the rest of it. And it's going to be tough because it's a long series, that Ashes, isn't it? Because if you English teams in the last few tours down there, I mean, there's obviously been successes down the years. Don't get me wrong. Let's not forget the triumphant English teams in Australia, but if you get off to a bad start in the Ashes, with all of the hype that's been there, all of the scrutiny, everything that's involved in that, all the players knowing it's kind of their definitive series potentially. If you start to go downhill, that slope can be quite steep. And then by the fifth test, you're really struggling, probably mentally as well as form-wise. So England, if they're going to have a chance, they need to get off to a good start in that series.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great pleasures is, I'm based in Sydney. So by the time the fifth test gets to Sydney, usually by the time the English team and the English journalists get to me, they're just broken men and women. They've just been beaten down by the poor results and relentless Australian abuse. Damien, what do you got any questions for James about English cricket?
Just in terms of baseball and the phenomenon that it is, I know you spoke about whether the style has had a positive or negative impact on English cricket in general. What about from a media point of view? I'm looking at it in a bit of a lateral way, but has it at least created, I know the Ashes in 2023 helped in a way, but has it at least created some headlines and some attention towards the way England play the game? Whereas you look back at that team in the 90s, for instance, they were a little bit timid by comparison. Does it at least give a bit of spotlight time for English cricket, or am I thinking too laterally?
No, I think it has. I think there's definitely people talking about baseball, not necessarily always in a positive, but and as I say, there's been some wonderful days in Test cricket with England where they've really taken the attack to the opposition and fashioned wins when wins weren't traditionally possible. But there's a reason that England have played 150 plus years of Test cricket in the style they did, and the reason that Test cricket's played by countries the way it is, because that is the way to win matches over a consistent period. Going out there and just swinging from the hip and being ultra aggressive all of the time isn't sustainable, I don't think. And there was talk in the England camp about kind of Bazball 2.0, playing Bazball with a few more brains engaged rather than just going out there and playing with the gut. And that is much needed, I think. And there's nothing wrong, I don't think, in going out there and being on the front foot and being positive. But I think there's been some sessions under Bazball where, there was the one in the Ashes at Lords, wasn't it, where Australia's bounced England out. England just took on every single hook shot going purely out of bravado and ego and what have you, and just hold out down at deep square every single time. And you're kind of watching that thinking, well, where's the sense in this? This just isn't. Yeah. Whereas a proper Test cricketer would sway out the way of a few, kind of soak up pressure for 20 minutes and then come back onto the front foot when the time was right. But England have got to kind of judge that with Bazball. And I don't think they've got everything right with Bazball at all. And we spoke about these tough matches coming forward. If England kind of play ultra aggressive and lose over the next 12 months, then I don't see that Brendan McCullum can continue. If England obviously play aggressively and win all these matches, go down under and beat you, Brendan McCullum's going to probably be knighted and his picture will be all over England. But there's a few ifs in that sentence before that can happen.
You know what? It's interesting. Was the sort of how the two teams had switched roles in the 2023 Ashes. Normally, it's Australia that are the aggressive and are the ones that take the game on. And we did in our own way, but, it was, the Australians being accused of being dour and being a bit slow when Khawaja and Labuschagne were struggling to get going, and the English that were, the ones that were the aggressors. So it was sort of the roles had been reversed. Look, I am, I'm looking for a peaceful Ashes coming up, but I do have to say, James, like, I was pretty disgusted by what happened at Lords in 2023, and I was pretty disgusted by Stokes and McCullum getting on their high horse about the spirit of cricket, like a very sanctimonious. And the thing is, Baz is not even a Pom. Like, we know Poms can be quite good at that. Present company excluded, but he's not even a Pom, and he got like that.
Well, Ben's a Kiwi too, isn't he? Really,
Exactly. So two Kiwis getting on their high horse about the spirit of cricket, and then obviously the reaction of the fans, and then I didn't even like the fact that it was Smith's 100th Test that week, and most of the media actually didn't pay tribute to Smith. They just used the Bairstow thing as a way of undermining, undermining Australian cricket and bringing up the sandpaper stuff again. So I thought the whole thing was unedifying, and they've done a lot of soul searching about it. So what do you think?
I think the rules are the rules, and if you're out, you're out. Simple as that. And I think Johnny on that day was out. And all of the nastiness that happened after it was unnecessary. As simple as that. I think what with things like that, all these people that were shouting at, because I was sort of saying that on social media, and I was getting pelters by people saying, "Well, the ball was dead." No, the ball wasn't dead. The ball's only dead when both teams think it's dead. And obviously, Alex Carey didn't think it was dead, so he was out. And I think the way to do stuff like that is umpire's finger goes up. He was out by the letter of the law. If you don't like the law, change the law. That's how you play it. You don't kind of boo people for the rest of the Test match and all the kind of and call people cheats. I think there is a little bit of with the Ashes, obviously. I think most English and Australians get on very well together, as we are today.
Yes.
But there is that rivalry, and you want to kind of you want to kind of stick it up them, and you want to try and get the upper hand. But that does. So I think in that Test match, it did spill over. It's good for the media and it's good for the TV for it to kind of be there and to have that needle, because it adds to the drama. But the danger of it spilling over. And when you got kind of the egg and bacon guys in the long room, confronting the Australians and stuff like that, it's gone way too far, hasn't it?
And I also think it did actually highlight that at its core, there is actually a cultural difference about the way the English and Australia see cricket and the way it should be played. Like, so, I hear a lot of around that time from English people, "Oh, mate, they wouldn't say mate, but they'd be like, you wouldn't do that you're playing for, Billericay Cricket Club against Southend. You're not going to run someone out like that." Whereas, if you're talking in Australia about, Randwick playing East, they're both, yes, I would definitely run him out if he's an idiot to wander out of his crease when the ball's live, bad luck. And, so I think they actually did highlight at some level, there's a cultural difference about the way they view that.
I don't know about that, because I reckon if Johnny Bairstow had done the same to Alex Carey, if the roles had been reversed.
Yes, absolutely.
That Lord's crowd would have been saying, "Oh, Johnny Bairstow, what a wonderful piece of cricket." He's thought about that, and he's kind of executed that brilliantly.
I guess more from a fan point of view, I'm thinking, the average punter that just loves cricket.
I think the spirit of cricket thing, Menners, is interesting, because I'm all for the spirit of cricket. I think, cricket played fairly, you kind of respect the other team, blah, 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 blah. But you also play to the rules. And the rules in that instance suggested that Johnny Bairstow was out, so he was out. But I think, the spirit of cricket thing, it kind of goes alongside the rules or above the rules or whatever. And it's the Andrew Flintoff putting his arm around Brett Lee in 2005. It's those kind of things where you're kind of fighting hard on the pitch, but you're also showing that respect to the opposition at the same time.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, I know Australian crowds aren't perfect. I'm not trying to get on my host and say nothing ever bad happens with Australian crowds. But I do feel like during the Ashes, especially, there is a heightened sort of football of sort of the crowds turn into football crowds at the cricket, and they just drink all day and they really get stuck in. And for them, they're yelling abuse at Australian players. They're singing songs about Rolf Harris, which just like not on, like stuff that's really not on, giving it to Carey's family and all that kind of thing. And they're just hammered. A lot of the crowd's just hammered, don't know where they are half the time. And you really saw that in the 2023 Ashes after Lords. They'd really riled up the crowds.
As you said at the start of that, I don't think the Australians have got a particularly moral high ground there, because I think when England go down under, it is exactly the same.
Well, I don't know if it's exactly the same, but they get abused for sure. But I don't know, it seems more intense in England.
I remember the pig with Eddie Hemmings' name written on the side of it, wasn't it?
That's funny.
Yeah, that was funny. But everybody needs to calm down a little bit and just enjoy your cricket. But you kind of, with the Ashes, you do get the floating sports fans that just want the spectacle, that come for the day out rather than actually really, necessarily love the game. There's nothing wrong with that, because cricket needs the ticket sales. But I mean, that takes on to ticket prices in England, which are absolutely scandalous. But a full house at the Ashes is probably different to a full house for, say, England against Bangladesh, because you'll get the purists turning up to watch England against Bangladesh. You'll get people that just want to experience the Ashes turning up for England Australia.
Another question. You've got okay, so we'll agree to disagree on that. I think England crowds have just turned a nasty corner in the last Ashes, but it was just this mob mentality.
I mean, Australians haven't helped themselves with Sandpapergate and stuff like that either, have they?
I know, but we can't. The thing is, Australians now we don't have the football culture, so we don't sing the songs. We sit on our hands. We're too polite. We're too in a nanny state. But you will get some dickhead standing up and telling Stuart Broad to go F himself or something. But just coming up this summer, something really interesting happened here this summer. So, we had the Australia-India series. And before the summer, people were asking me, does the Australia-India rivalry at all match the Ashes? And I'd said, no, not really. The Ashes has got so much history behind it that there is quite a big gap between the two series. But then this summer, there was huge interest, huge growth in Australia v India. And actually, they're very close now in terms of consumption and interest, fueled by, the huge Indian immigrant population here. But, it's neck and neck now. Coming into your summer, obviously England and India's history is rich in the colonial sense. What's the rivalry like?
It's similar, really. I think it's, obviously the Australians India going down under and winning with almost like a second team added a bit of bite to that series, didn't it? And obviously Rishabh Pant's heroics and stuff in that series. But I think it's coming on certainly with England against India in this country as well. And obviously, we've got some fantastic players on that Indian side. I've got to be honest, I actually probably enjoy watching India play cricket more than I enjoy watching England play cricket, because I think some of their players, just like Jaiswal, he's just glorious at the top of the order. And, with the backstories that are associated with some of these players, Jaiswal comes from, it's literally rags to riches in his case. And there's a few of those in that Indian side, and the backstory behind the player playing glorious cricket. It's feature films have been made about a lot less. So there's some. I think watching India is tremendous, and in the same way that you guys down in Australia have got a lot of expats, and the immigrants from the subcontinent have come to England, Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. There's a lot of that population in this country who would consider themselves English until that cricket starts, and then they will be very much behind Team India wearing their shirts and stuff. So there'll be a good atmosphere, I think, at those games in the English summer. The Indian fans will be there in force, and the English will be hoping to win the series. But it's going to be it will be a really good series. That I think the recent series between the two countries in England, not in India, when India tend to spin England out in very quick time, but in England, where the conditions maybe just level things up a little bit, it should be a very good summer.
Excellent. I'll be watching on from winter down under. Damien, you got anything for James before I let him go?
Yeah, maybe just one last one. Going forward for England in terms of leadership? That's always been a bit of a narrative, hasn't it, over the last 10 to 15 years, not only on the field, but also from a coaching point of view. I know we've spoken about Baz McCullum a lot, but do you think, and particularly in relation to the women's team as well, who were humbled in Australia, do you think there needs to be a change in the way the system works in England when it comes to coaching, when it comes to developing players? If you had to highlight one or two things that England could improve on in that space, what would they be?
I think with the women's team, you're quite right. England were woeful on that tour. But I think with women's cricket, that's probably a little bit behind Australia in kind of the progress there. The one good thing about the 100 has been
it's been great for women's cricket.
Yeah, it's been brilliant for women's cricket in England, and hopefully that will, the kind of proof from that pudding will start to kind of evolve. I think with that England women's team, there's probably 3 or 4 genuinely world-class players on that side, and that because the culture's changed in English women's cricket. It's not that long ago it was very much an amateur sport in England, but now they're getting paid and rewarded quite nicely for that. And some players, I think, have really grasped the nettle and thought, right, I'm going to really make my career from this. Other players have maybe, with that extra money and the comfort that's brought, have maybe just sort of, even if it's subconsciously, just relaxed a little bit, and they need to get that right, and then that needs to be led properly. But I think the future's bright for women's cricket in England. I think with the leadership generally, if we look at the England dressing room, we've got obviously the white ball captaincy up for taking at the moment, and Ben Stokes captain of the Test team. We tend to, in England, probably in every country, but I think it's tend to just appoint the best player, and that's not always the best leader. It's not always the best tactician. Just kind of picking somebody because they are guaranteed to play doesn't make them the leader in that group. And I think with the white ball team, I'd like to see them actually maybe even kind of going away to the counties and thinking, right, who's actually led a white ball side with distinction, across the 18 counties. And is he English? Well, if he is, well, let's consider him. But kind of just trying to, in desperate terms, to try and shoehorn.
That'd be unusual to have an English captain.
Yeah. Well, obviously, kind of going back to the Mike Brearley days, he was picked because he was an astute leader, I think there's kind of the likes of Tom Abel and Lewis Gregory and stuff at Somerset, and there's some very good players who have been on the edges of English cricket for a while, who could, I think, do a good job in that situation. And rather than actually just kind of flogging Ben Stokes to death, actually get somebody in there that actually really, maybe even make the 50-over cricket team a different team. Kind of use it as a team, a way of blooding players and seeing if they got what it takes to appear on the international stage.
Well, a bit like what they did with Morgan, get a new leader in and say build a team for the 2027 World Cup.
Well, Owen Morgan's interesting because I don't think he was the best player in that side. He had some wonderful stats behind him in terms of white ball cricket, but I think he wasn't necessarily seen as being the biggest player in that side. But so it was probably the one time that England have actually appointed somebody who wasn't the best player, but he was appointed because he was obviously astute and he was intelligent and he had cricket intelligence and worked out how to get the best out of his 11 players on the park. And I think maybe just kind of moving away, certainly in the 50-over format, to somebody who is seen as a leader of that pack rather than just the best player. There's a lot of talk about Ben Stokes has been mentioned. Harry Brook's been mentioned as well as being a future England captain, and maybe this is his white ball team. He's just pulled out the IPL, and that's kind of given people the suggestion that that's because he wants to concentrate on being the New England white ball captain. I think he just wants a rest because the calendar is a bit relentless, and if you start to lose form, if you're playing really well, the calendar's great because you just move from match to match and you score loads of runs. If you kind of find yourself out of form and it's a relentless kind of treadmill downwards, that's not great. So I think he's just taking a break. But I think it's probably a bit too early for Harry Brook. I'd like to see Harry Brook kind of cement himself as a real force in world cricket before he took on the captaincy. But England and leadership. It kind of goes back to what I said before about trying to get what's best for the team in 10 years' time rather than next week. And England tend to go down the next week route rather than think longer term.
Yeah. All right, James, I've got to let you go. But one more question, do you think Harry Brook is as good as Sam Constas?
Well, Sam Constas is. I would suggest that Sam Constas is the best 10-ball player I've ever seen.
Get lost.
Because he, the little paddles for 6, blah 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 blah, then he's out. But very, very fun-filled over, isn't it? That Sam Constas gives you. Harry Brook is the creme de la creme. If Harry Brook actually reaches anything like his potential, he's going to have stats to die for.
Yeah, I was being facetious. I mean, I think Brooks got about 10 more test hundreds than Constas.
Just on Sam Constas,
yes,
I was quite excited about seeing him play and being picked because he was obviously scoring runs and he kind of earned his selection. But I got the impression with Sam Constas that in the Shield he was playing a little bit more sensibly and he was batting properly and wasn't quite as headless as he was when he got in the Test team. So I mean that innings that he played in his first innings was tremendous. I thought it was really good fun, but you kind of felt it could be out any ball. I got the impression that in the Shield he'd earned his selection by playing proper cricket. He got into the Australian team and he just kind of tried to play the baseball kind of thing.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with baseball. It is generational things. So, he's facing Bumrah, who's just bowling, swing the ball around corners, can't lay bat on it. What do we do when we're growing up, Jimmy? Our age, we go, I'm going to bloody dig in here. Just going to, try and get through this and then I'll milk the other bowlers. But what does the now generation go? I'm just going to back away and try and hit this guy for 6, or I'm going to walk across my stumps and try and smack him over square leg, or I'm going to run at him to put him off his length. So he got caught up in that mindset. I think people undervalue the tactics behind it, where he thought, look, I'm just not going to be able to survive here. Khawaja, who averages 50 as an opening batter, said, look, I just got Bumrah all summer. He was just too good. And, Constas, I think, just went, well, I'm not going to hang around here. But, we grew up in a generation where you're like, well, dig in.
That's the downside of the baseball, that ethos that you're just talking about there, is that it is really entertaining when it works. A player comes out there and blasts 100 before lunch on day one of the Test match. It's really exciting. But when you get out and you play a stupid shot to get out, it does look like you don't know what you're doing. It looks like you think that every ball's got your name on it, and you therefore need to try and maximize the number of runs you can get in the 10 balls you're only going to face, because you're not going to be there very long. So it doesn't show a huge amount of trust in your technique and your ability, does it?
No, and you got to have the gears. You can't always go in 4th and 5th gear. You've got to be able to move through them. All right, James, thank you so much for joining us on the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. Now tell the listeners, where can they find your podcast and where can they keep up with all your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on X or Twitter, or whatever it's called today, on @cricket_badger. cricketbadgerpod.com is the website. You can, and basically sticking Cricket Badger into any podcast platform and you'll find me.
Yep, and I heard you have an Aussie on sometimes, so you touch on Aussie cricket. So it's a podcast for everybody.
We have I've kind of got Cullen fan badges from around the world, got Indians, Australians, what have you, and Lucas comes on representing Australia, and I basically treat him like rubbish, and hopefully we can beat Australians.
Yeah, is he nicer to you than I was tonight?
He is. I mean,
yes,
I can't answer that. I can't answer that.
He's polite.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Menners. Actually, it's been really nice to be on.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining us, listeners. We're going to take a break and then we'll be back with more. Thanks, James. That was amazing.
Okay, mate.
I'm going to boot you out of here, and it'll just upload your audio, and then you can disappear.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you. Well, welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. That was great to have James on, wasn't it, Damien?
Yeah, great to get his insights. He has a pretty decent knowledge of what's happening here in Australia as well. So he's a cricket badger by name and by nature.
Absolutely. And certainly great to get an update on what's happening for the oldest of enemies. All right, let's get on to some local news. Announcement this afternoon, actually, that they are thinking of awarding Darwin two T20 internationals in August against South Africa. So there is a winter series this year against South Africa being played up north in ODI and 20 over cricket. And actually, there's been some speculation this was one of the reasons Steve Smith retired from 50 over cricket, is because he wants to be free in the middle of the year for the 100 and Major League Cricket. But anyway, Darwin could get cricket again. They haven't hosted cricket since 2008. They're also maybe going to play ODIs and T20s in Cairns and Mackay. I love this idea, Damien. I think I would like winter series every winter. I know football's on. I know it takes up a lot of the oxygen, but I think it's a great way of keeping cricket in people's minds all year round.
Yeah, the thing is, the calendar's changed compared to what it was like when they were playing these 20-odd years ago. Menas, remember Bangladesh came in 2003 and they had a multi-format series. From memory, it was 2 test matches and a few one-dayers, and then Sri Lanka came for a 2 test match series in 2004. As you mentioned, I think Bangladesh went up to Darwin, or went down from their perspective to Darwin in 2008. There was that series, wasn't there, in Townsville, I reckon, where Zimbabwe played a couple of one-dayers a couple of years ago against Australia. So, you know, they do, and Cairns obviously has hosted matches as well. So it has been done a few times before. We've seen the rise in prominence where a lot of Victorian Premier cricket players and even some first-class players go up to Darwin and play in the Premier competition up there.
Happens here.
They sort of have a bit of a mini BBL pre-season, don't they? So that holds a great sense of practice for the players, but it realistically doesn't get a heck of a lot of attention. Different when it's international cricket, obviously. I like the idea. It's not the first time South Africa have played a winter series here, Menas too. You go back to 2000. They played in a few one-days against Australia when they first opened Marvel Stadium, as it's now known, in Melbourne, under the roof.
Yeah, there was some crazy results. I think there was a tie and there was a Steve Waugh 100 maybe.
The Pentasoft series. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's set to happen. Darwin to host more international cricket. Want to talk about the Sheffield Shield? Hey, I was nice enough then to the cricket badger, wasn't I?
Yeah, very polite. I did say you would be tempered, and you were tempered. You were very polite. You just had one disagreement throughout the entire thing, so that's good from you.
Yep. He was very sensible and very, very, very lovely. All right.
He was on your side regarding Bairstow and Carey and everything.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Sheffield Shield. So in the second last round of the year, South Australia and Queensland both won. New South Wales drew. At the moment, South Australia with that win are now hosting the Sheffield Shield final. South Australia chased down 300 in the fourth innings versus Victoria. Jake Lehman, 105 not out. So a huge win for them. They host the Sheffield Shield final. So they've won the one-day cup. Now they get a chance to do the double at home. I guess the big talking point at the moment is they're trying to have the Sheffield Shield final being played at the Adelaide Oval. And for those overseas listeners, the complexity with that is they're playing AFL football on the weekends at the moment in Adelaide. So they're thinking of moving the Sheffield Shield final to Monday to Friday, putting the drop-in pitch back in and then taking it out again, and they play the football on the weekends around it. Now, that seems like it was going to happen. The latest reporting as we record this is there's some financial negotiations going on at the moment. The AFL seeking compensation for allowing the Sheffield Shield final to be played there when they have possession of the ground. So that hasn't been confirmed yet. But if they were able to pull this off, Damien, this would be fantastic.
I agree because of the context surrounding it. There's been a long drought for South Australia. I think 1996 was the last time they won a Shield title, and there's been a lot of mediocrity since then, it must be said. Adelaide's a very parochial place. I know there's a lot of press surrounding this in South Australia. It'll be interesting to see what sort of crowds they get as well, given there's a lot of history on the line. I think the main talking point, you mentioned the financial compensation. A lot of that also comes down to the length of the grass. I mentioned that Australia v South Africa winter series they had at Marvel Stadium. That was a similar thing where they played it in between AFL matches. And I think it was in the lead up to an AFL final, and there were problems with the length of the grass. It was too short for football, and players were slipping and sliding all over the place. So it sort of set up an interesting precedent. I think it has to be of a certain level there. I think they're going to try and provide a bit of a compromise for the minimum level of the grass. I know this sounds like it's a trivial thing, but it's not, because it comes down to health and safety and things like that. So that's got to come into consideration as well. It's going to be a massive curator effort. I'd like to think the AFL can see the bigger picture surrounding this. This is a real outlier at the end of the day. I'd like to think they do the right thing and ensure that, they can do everything possible to allow both things. I know as long as the health and safety things get ticked off, I mean, I think there are other things that cricket can do, perhaps as a bit of a compromise down the track, where they can do a favour for the AFL rather than giving away money in compensation. I think maybe they can do something a little bit further down the track in response for the AFL.
Yeah, no, I like it. So, really great season for South Australia at the moment. Just in that last Sheffield Shield round, Sam Constas, this is sort of World Test Championship watch. Sam Constas made 50 of 107 deliveries in the second innings. New South Wales trying to bat it out for a draw. So he showed England and James Butler that he's got a different side to his game. He can, not a great dismissal, ran past one of one of the spinners, was out for 50. Also, Usman Khawaja made 127 for Queensland. So he's still in great form after that Sri Lankan series. So going into the last round of the Shield, South Australia are on top, hosting the final. But then you got Queensland in second spot. They're playing South Australia. So, this could be a precursor to the final, but also, it's an interesting round because Queensland needing to win to play in the final. South Australia have already got the final. Does South Australia maybe rest a couple of players, or do they just take their foot off the gas? And then you've got New South Wales, WA and Victoria all behind Queensland, and WA play Victoria. So either one of those could, win and then leapfrog Queensland in second spot. Western Australia playing at home, so they have a lot to play for. And then in the other game, New South Wales are playing Tasmania. They're playing that in Tasmania, but Tasmania are out of the season. So New South Wales have a chance there of maybe pouncing on the fact that Tasmania don't have anything to play for, and they could get a win and maybe play against South Australia. So, it's going to be a really intriguing final round. Something that is passed across the desk is that Usman Khawaja, I believe, is resting from this final round of Sheffield Shield cricket. Now, I don't understand this. He's just made 100, and Queensland are still in with a chance of playing in the Sheffield Shield final, but he won't be playing in that game. And I think this is disgraceful. This has happened before. Usman Khawaja tends to play most home Shield games, but he doesn't travel to away Shield games. I just can't believe this. Season on the line, and Khawaja's not playing. I mean, this is pretty disgraceful.
Well, it doesn't say much for how certain people think of Shield cricket, does it? When there's something on the line. I'm a little bit surprised in the sense that he's in pretty good form as well. I would have thought he'd have, even with the competitive juices, as he'd want to go out there and play. So, whether there's extenuating circumstances we're not aware of, I'm not sure. But it's an interesting one, no doubt about that.
I've got the team up in front of me. So Marnus Labuschagne is coming back and he's captaining Queensland, but no Usman Khawaja. Bad look.
Unless there's extenuating circumstances, I just don't understand why, given he's just scored a century. But anyway, well, Queensland, they'll have to rely on their depth. It's interesting with the permutations. I think Victoria, as you mentioned, is still a mathematical chance of making it, but they haven't been in very good form. They were competitive against South Australia, but they've lost their last 4 on the trot after it looked like just before Christmas, that they were probably going to make the final. They've really fallen away. Yeah,
no, I heard Chris Rogers on your radio station talking about their season and just quite haven't been able to put it together. But with Khawaja, and I've said this before, it just feels to me like some of the really big stars now in Australian cricket seem to feel like the Sheffield Shield is not quite worth their time in terms of value. And when you think about how much these guys are getting paid to play in leagues and appearance fees, all that kind of thing that are playing in the Sheffield Shield kind of like they do it sometimes. As I said, like Kawaja plays when he can drive from home and play and come home, he does it. But other than that, he's too busy for the Sheffield Shield. All right.
Sad, isn't it?
It is sad. All right. Other bit of news to wrap things up. The Women's Premier League, the finalists have been decided. So Delhi Capitals are through to the grand final. They finished on top of the ladder by net run rate. And then the Mumbai Indians will take on the Gujarat Giants in the eliminator to see who plays if the Delhi Capitals. Obviously, the Delhi Capitals have a few Aussie players, but Jess Jonathan's been doing really well for them.
The star.
Yeah, Meg Lanning's been opening the batting, Annabelle Sutherland. So, they're into the final. Gujarat Giants, Ashley Gardner, Phoebe Litchfield playing for them. So, yeah, lot of interest in those last, in the finals now. So, Friday morning, our time, Mumbai play Gujarat, and then Sunday morning is the final.
Just on Jess Jonathan, Menners, do you think? I think she gets a bit of a raw deal not being considered for selection in the Australian side. The amount of times that she stood up in super over situations, she's always done her job. She's a classy all-rounder. I know she's at the older end of the age scale, but I guess you got to redevelop and regenerate your team so that they get exposure to the higher level. But gee, she's stiff. She's playing so well in the WPL, and she did last year as well.
Oh, I totally agree. I think she's an international standard player, and it's a little bit like the situation that the men's team was in the sort of 90s and 2000s, where there is so many great players that you just can't fit them all in. Like Australia's, it's a bit like India's white ball teams at the moment. So I'm trying to suck up to them. They could put out a second team that was competitive, and it's a bit like Australia could probably put out two international teams at the moment and be competitive. But that is the Women's Premier League. All right. That is all the local news. Keeping it, we'll be back to update you on who the Shield finalists are. But now it is can't let it go. That little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the wicket keeper. Damien, what have you got for me?
I've got two for you, Menners. First of all, Sonny Gavaskar's dancing at the end of the Champions Trophy final. Did you see that clip? What the hell's going on there? It's like that won the World Cup, as you said, just going back to our discussion at the start.
That was one of the things that triggered me. That was one of the things that led me to sending out that ill-advised tweet.
He's never even did that in his playing days. Why is he celebrating over a Champions Trophy final? Look, good on him for being happy and everything like that. And I'm not trying to admonish someone for being happy, but yeah, just going over the top as per usual. And the other thing too, Menners, I noticed they're trying to, I suppose, in the women's caper, develop players to play longer format games because we don't see a lot of test matches at national level for them. And they've got a green v gold match going on at the moment in Canberra. And I just think it gets lost in the wash a little bit. I'd like to see a bit more coverage of it because it just seems like a bit of a practice match. I think it'd be good if they really wanted to take it seriously, because then it becomes just match practice, doesn't it? It'd be good if they streamed it or had some sort of coverage or more coverage than what they provide, because they're probably the next tier of players coming into the Australian team.
Yes, I did see that. I think it's live on YouTube, that green v gold game.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yep.
I stand corrected then. Is there I'll have to have a look.
Yep. All right. Good one. And my can't let it go is so Austin Waugh, so Steve Waugh's son, has been picked for the New South Wales second 11. So listeners will remember we spoke about this when he first emerged. Austin Waugh was a star for the Australian under-19s. He looked like he was sort of on a path to play international cricket. Then he stepped away from the game for a while. And now he's come back in the last couple of years. And this season he's playing for Randwick Petersham, and he's made 4 centuries, and he's been picked for the New South Wales second 11. And, he's a chip off the old block. He looks like Steve Waugh. His mannerisms are the same. Apparently he's as quiet as Steve Waugh around the dressing room. But, the Waugh name is not completely lost from Australian cricket. And, I'll be watching with interest because, I've heard Mike Whitney talk about what a talented player Austin Waugh is. And, I'd love to see him do well for New South Wales second 11 and maybe break into that stateside.
Be great. It's a lot of pressure, isn't it, for a player, who has the father that he has to come in. We see it with Leighton Hewitt's son of the tennis at the moment as well, Cruz Hewitt. I get the feeling, though, probably not the same level of pressure as what Cruz is facing, but there's always going to be that comparison, isn't there? And that adds an extra layer of pressure.
Yeah, and I still can't let go of this tweet. So, when I quote tweeted Harsha Bogle, our friend Dan Cherney, a journalist down in Melbourne, he quote tweeted Bogle's tweet as well, but he wrote enormous NAB Cup energy. And it didn't quite get the vitriol that my tweet got because
they don't know what the NAB Cup is, man. It's the Indian cricket fans.
Exactly. And for those that don't know, the NAB Cup is like the preseason tournament for the AFL. See, I didn't even know it had stopped. But it was very much, and so Dan Cherney was clever in two ways because it got the point across without raising the ire of the Indian fans. Some of the comments I've got: jealous sandpaper uncle. The hatred for India runs deep. These whites despise it with all their heart. Grow up, the old bald ass. Grow up. Hashtag crybaby. Aussies are cheaters, my friend, e.g. sandpaper. We don't do such things. You are behaving like a Pakistani. This feels so much like an English person talking, as in an Englishman. Now, that kind of got under my skin. I don't like
that was the most offensive of them all towards you.
Yeah. Never saw Aussies behave like this on social media. It looks like India definitely hit a nerve. Well, that tweet of mine certainly hit a nerve. And look, I'm pro Indian cricket. We know all that. I've laid it all out. But I appreciate all the feedback on social media. I love it. I didn't quite.
Your opinion matters, Menas.
Yeah, and look, I was sort of putting the tweet out in jest. I mean, Australia has 6 World Cups. India has 2. Anyway, Damien, what's happening for you this weekend?
Getting stuck back into footy matters. The footy codes are coming in, which I know will disappoint you. You'd rather cricket be at the forefront of the media all year round, but this is sort of a bit of a solemn time for you in a way.
Where can the listeners catch up with you?
At Damo_Watts on Twitter.
Beautiful stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. We'll be back next week, keeping up with the weekly shows throughout the off season. Always stuff to talk about. But thanks very much to James Butler, the Cricket Badger, for joining us. A great guest. Yes. It was great to hear his insights on English cricket and get his opinions. And I urge you to go and look out for his work. But thanks, everybody, for watching.